is a live class of BHIE 145. And this is the BHIE 145, and the full form of this, some aspects of European history. Now, in this class or in this session, we are talking about the European history, which is connected with 1785 to 1945. This is a very main and important time period related to European history. And we are discussing in class some aspects of European history, how European history was formed, and what aspects they were asking about in European history. And we are going to cover in this class unit 1 and unit 2. And as you all know, the unit 1, the modern state and political culture, how the state has formed modern and what was the political culture of that particular area. And we are talking about which country? France. Europe, mainly Europe, France, Paris, and Italy. We are talking about these countries and what were the changes they were facing, the people of that particular area they were facing at that time. Now we are going to start about the introduction of modern state and political structure, and what was the main European state, what was the condition of the European state at that time. The modern European state was able to act in this manner for a variety of reasons. Just like the most important of these were number one, direct rule. And through its monopoly on the exercise of legitimate coercion and nationalism, through its imposition of cultural uniformity on the population under its control, and the state's democratic legitimation through its claim to embody the will of the people. And this unit will familiarize you with the main features of modern state and political politics. We are discussing about the main features, which is related to direct rule and related to the formation of modern state and the formation of modern politics in this chapter. Number one, and first of all, we are discussing about the direct rule and what was the bureaucracy at that time. Because at earlier time we have discussed a lot of related to direct rule, and the emperors and the rulers of that particular area and the rulers of particular region, they were facing and they were giving the direct rule to their people and to their subjects. If we are talking about the chronologically, the first and perhaps the most important foundation of modern European state was direct rule. From the 15th century onwards, European monarchs increasingly imposed their direct rule on their subjects and concentrated all power in their hands, because they did so by depriving their feudal lords. Means they have not connected with their feudal lords, and they have taken all the powers from the feudal lords and the states of power, and appointing royal officials or lesser nobles directly responsible to or dependent only on the monarch. Bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is an administrative hierarchy of officials. Administrative hierarchy of officials with the following features are just like they are salaried professionals who have no personal interest in the decisions they take or they enforce. They carry out the orders of their superiors and issue orders to their inferiors, who implement such orders in the same fashion. They act according to rules laid down by law, not according to personal whim or preference. They are selected for their expertise in the area concerned, not for their personal, family, or class connections. They are replaceable like parts of a machine, like a newcomer or substitute will act in the same manner as the person who has been replaced, such that little depends on just the individual. Means the bureaucrats were the person who were dependent on the emperor, who were dependent on some other persons, because they have no right to take their own decision on behalf of the subjects, on behalf of the emperor. They have no right, such type of right. It is bureaucracy in such rational legal form that makes the modern state so immensely powerful in the sense of being effective. Bureaucracy is an instrument that is more reliable and responsive than any other and can penetrate any field. Impersonality, expertise, action according to rules, strict hierarchy, easy replaceability makes it possible to carry out decisions with precision and predictable results. Next, that is why in pre modern times, rulers' actions were immensely ostentatious and dramatic, but far less effective than those in modern times. Displays of power in pre modern times used to take the form of personal opulence in the costume and lifestyles of rulers. Elaborate court etiquettes, enormous generosity by rulers on certain special occasions like coronations, arbitrary mercy to criminals, extraordinary violence to political opponents, etc. These type of activities the rulers were performing in pre-modern times. Now, the state seeks to anticipate problems, to hunt for sedition, and to access the mind of people. It deploys systems of surveillance, gathering of intelligence on every aspect of the life of citizens in order to foresee a problem or to decide how best to act in any number of hypothetical situations. In addition, the modern state's capacity for violence and repression is infinity greater than that of any of the most famous tyrants in history. This derives not only from its claim to the monopoly of violence, but more from the organization of military system and technological development of modern weapon system. In pre-modern times, feudal magnate could maintain an army because at that time the feudal lords were maintaining the army for the emperors because the emperors had given a lot of powers to the feudal lords because they were big landlords and they were facing a lot of privileges related to their works and they were exempted to paying tax. They were not giving any type of tax to the emperor, so they were facing a lot of privileges and they were enhancing that privileges to the particular area. Next, we are talking about the French Revolution. Have you heard about the French Revolution? French Revolution is the main and important part of this history. The French Revolution demonstrated what a modern army and total war could be by calling up all able bodied citizens to the army. This was the first full scale national recruitment in history and was in itself an extraordinary innovation. Feudal nobles could maintain armies of a few thousands, but the modern state now would maintain standing or permanent armies of hundreds of thousands, and in the 20th century, these would become millions. Weapons, if we are talking about weapons technology likewise titled the balance in favor of the state. Balance in favor of the state. Cavalry, infantry could be outfitted by feudal lords, but the cost of artillery could be borne only by the state. This was already evident from the 15th century. The 20th century then saw two further terrifying innovations. What was that? The tank and mastery of the skis, which from the outset remained a monopoly of the state. Next is earlier we have discussed about the feudal lords and we have discussed about the they maintained armies who feudal lords, feudalism and the feudals they maintain armies and they give help to the emperor at the time of war and at the time of any misunderstanding with situations at that time. Next is we are talking about nationalism and nation state, how they maintain, how they enhance, and how they enhance nationalism in their country. With this awesome accumulation of resources, the modern European state then imposed uniformity on its citizens, thereby creating what we call the nation and nationalism. If all citizens were the product of same culture, the capacity to act on them, to predict responses, to satisfy preferences, indeed to create a set of common choices, that was greatly enhanced. On the other hand, a divided people suggested a fragmented state or a number of different centers of power. This was the case under feudalism, which was overcome by royal absolutism, imposing of the will of a single center. A single state therefore implied a single people, and the modernizing state set about creating such a single people consciously. This was done by the people, now called citizens, being required to submit themselves to the same set of principles that govern their society. Perhaps the most powerful instrument of homogenization or creating such uniformities was education. Because education is a tool by which we can overcome some problems related to the society, related to the economy. Because with the help of education, we create so much occupations, we create so much employment for the people. They were facing some problems at that time, and the modern Europe state, unlike its predecessors, was singularly active in the field of education. It increasingly made primary and then secondary education universal and compulsory. Through such an educational system, it ensured a common set of values and single language as taught in schools, which could be different from what was available at home or in the region. Similarly, in 1860s, at the time of unification of Italy, unification of Germany, only about 2.5% of the population of Italy spoke Italian, 2.5%, and the rest spoke various regional languages, some of which survive to this day. Again, the new Italian state had to impose the Italian language on the whole population and thereby help fashion the Italian nation. Similar processes went on in all the nations and states of Europe. The nationalism and nation making became a universal phenomenon in the course of the 19th century. There was no modern state which did not sponsor its own nationalism. And the fatal problem of Russian and Austro Hungarian states was that they ruled over multinational empires in themselves. And they could have hoped to survive through a Russian or German nationalism, respectively, and thereby destroying the other cultures within their empires. That's why Europe came to be composed of a series of nation states, sovereign with their own treaty territories, equal in theory to every other, and related to each other in a system which became in itself an independent specialization called international relations. Hence, it led to a system composed of states which were sovereign and independent with respect to each other in theory and law, even if unequal in material resources. In terms of real power and resources, these states formed a hierarchy, but in theory, they were equal in status to each other. This led to the exchange of permanent ambassadors between states and to elaborate edifice of what is known as diplomacy. Through such diplomacy, each state was now an actor on the stage of international relations to defend and promote what is called its national interest. For it now spoke in the name of nation. If we are talking about, if we are taking the name of nation, then we can say that we are having national interest in our hearts. Next is democratic polity. As we are facing democracy in our country also, and they were facing the problems and they were gaining democratic polity. What was the circumstances and situations they were facing at that time in Europe? Paradoxically, while the modern state concentrated such enormous powers in its hands, the politics of the nation became democratic. In one sense, there should be no paradox since the state claimed to represent the popular will and to rest on the sovereignty of the people. Theoretically, the people were now sovereign as reflected in the electoral system. Hence, it was a democratic or people state that exercised such vast powers. Democratic politics meant something other than the people being the rulers. What is the meaning of democratic politics? That is something other than the people being the rulers. The people could never be the real rulers. They could have ruled directly only if numbers were so small, a few hundred at best, so that the people could meet regularly, they take decisions, and occupy public office. But modern nations consist of many millions of at least, hence, such notions of democracy are fanciful. The solution has been found since the 18th century in Europe and America of the people electing their representatives who then choose their rulers. This is a standard form of modern democratic constitution. As such, the people surrendered their power to representatives who acted on their own judgment, and the representatives surrendered their powers to a government which also acted at its discretion. The only effective control in the hands of people was the both the government and the representatives had to submit themselves periodically to elections when they could be replaced by others. Revolutionaries and counter revolutionaries pursued another logic of democratic politics. As in liberal democratic politics, they derived their power and legitimacy from popular support and choice. Hence, these were demonstrated, as usual, through elections and votes. Dictatorships could be imposed through perfectly democratic means. The first practitioner of this art of politics was Louis Napoleon in France in 1851 when he was elected through a plebiscite. He later proclaimed himself emperor and ruled essentially by decree on his democratic foundation. The most notorious case is that of Hitler. Have you heard about the name of Hitler? Yes, the most notorious case is that of Hitler, who won the general elections of 1932 to become the Chancellor of Germany and even secured dictatorial powers from the Reichstag. Reichstag means the German parliament through the Enabling Act of 1933. The judiciary performed two important functions. It executed it in disputes by applying the law. It interpreted the law in course of applying it. It declared what the real law was. Means these were the important functions of judiciary. Judiciary's important functions to enact law, to maintain law. The next reason why such a judiciary is deemed essential to democracy is the power of judicial review. This means that the highest court of the land, usually called Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court could examine legislation to decide whether it violated the constitution or not. If the people's representatives enact a law, judges of such Supreme Courts may reject the law. Then modern democratic politics is not democratic in many essential respects, even in the countries always proclaimed as modern democracies. The people do not rule. The administration of justice and judicial review is in the hands of group of persons responsible to nobody but themselves. Both the state claim to the legitimacy of its rule and the political parties. Mobilization of popular support are found on rights of citizens, as they were called during the French Revolution, or human rights, as they were restated by the United Nations. Next, we are talking about Unit 2. And in Unit 2, we are going to discuss about radical action by the masses. Earlier, we have studied in Unit 1, we have studied a lot of things. Just we should recall the important things of Unit 1, because in Unit 1, we have studied about the European history and some aspect of European history. And the time period of this history is 1789 to 1945. Okay, and in this time period, between this time period, we are going to discuss about the situation and the condition of Europe at that time, and how they were facing the problems when they had no democracy and they were having direct rule related to the emperors, and how much problems they were facing. Because we have discussed that if we have a very small population and a very few people, then we can give, then they were giving direct rule to the people, because the emperors and the sultans and the kings, and we can say whatever, they were enacting some laws in front of their subjects, in front of their people. They enact some law and the people had to follow that laws in front of them, because there were no democracy and there were no direct rule, and they were facing direct rule at that time. Direct rule means we have discussed about the direct rule just from the 15th century. They were facing about the direct rule, because European monarch system increasingly imposed direct rule on their subjects, and they concentrate all power in their own hands, because nobody can take any decision on behalf of the emperors, and they were not having any power on in the hands of feudal lords. And feudal lords, they were known as landlords, also big landlords. And we have discussed about the bureaucracy. And what was the bureaucracy? Bureaucracy means the ministers and the officials, they were having powers on behalf of their, because they were not having any right to take decision on behalf of the people. They were not having any power like this. They will have no personal interest in decisions, and they take or enforce, they carry out the orders of their superiors, and issue orders to their inferiors, who implement such orders in the same fashion. They act according to rules laid down by law, no, not according to personal whim or preference. Means they are selected for their expertise in the area concerned, not for their personal, family, their class connections. They are replaceable like parts of machine. Because if emperor wanted to replace the bureaucrats and the some officials of bureaucracy, they could change them. That is very important. Direct rule. What was the difference between direct rule and bureaucracy, and who were bureaucrats and who were facing direct rule? Next, we have studied about the modern state's capacity for violence. If they were having violence, they were facing any violence, and repression is infinitely greater than that of any of most famous tyrants in history. Means this device not only from its calm claim to the monopoly of violence, but more from organization of military system, because the feudal lords were having power to the feudal lords were having power at that time to maintain their own army, to maintain their military, so that at the time of war they were ready with their army for the help of emperor, to the lord's power. We have discussed about French Revolution. French Revolution, the people were facing so many problems related to French Revolution. That's why 1789 was the time period of that particular area for the particular war. And in 19th and 20th century, there were so many changes we have discussed earlier. And we have discussed about infantry, we have discussed about cavalry. And in 20th century, the tank and mastery of skis they were introducing at that time. Next, we have discussed about nationalism. If we are talking about nationalism, then we should talk about the democracy. If the democracy is there in the state, in the government, and the supreme power of that particular area is in the hands of Supreme Court. The largest court in the world is Supreme Court. All citizens had to all citizens had to follow the rules which was started from the Supreme Court and which was prevailed from the Supreme Court. And the people were divided into some fragmented states, just like different centers of power. This was the case under feudalism, which was overcome by royal absolutism and imposing a will of single center. And we are discussing about the most powerful instrument of homogenization or creating such uniformities was education. We have discussed about the power of education. If you want to change something in society, in society and particular area, then we should take the important tool that was the name of education. The modern European state, unlike its predecessors, was singularly active in the field of education. Have increasingly made primary and the secondary education universal and the compulsory, because at that time nobody was there who were not taking education at that time on behalf of primary and the secondary also. Means primary and secondary education they maintained compulsory at that time. Through such an educational system, it ensured a common set of values. Means a single language was taught in schools, and the language matters a lot at that time. If we are talking about the education, the language matters a lot, which could be different from what was available at home or in the region. That is a very different thing. Means we are using some other language in our home, and we are using speaking another language in the society. And if we are taking education, then our language should be changed at that time. They concentrated on that also. And next, we have discussed about there was no modern state which did not sponsor its own nationalism. And the fatal problem of Russian, Austro-Hungarian states was that they ruled over multinational empires in themselves. Means they have a lot of area and they have a lot of empire they were facing, and they were taking the decisions on behalf of this. They could have hoped to survive through a Russian, a German nationalism, respectively, and thereby they destroying the other cultures within their empires. And if we are talking about Europe, that's why they came to composed of a series of nation states. If we are talking about national and international relations, and they trade themselves with other countries, just like modern politics in Europe, therefore implied a peculiar structure of international relations, which has since been accepted as a universal model. And next, we have discussed about the unequal in material resources. Means some resources we get from other country and some resources we get from our own countries. In terms of real power and in terms of resources, these states formed a hierarchy. But in theory, they were equal in status to each other. This led to the exchange of permanent ambassadors between states and to elaborate a device of what is known as diplomacy. That is the main difference within. And for international relations, they were doing those type of activities for national interest also. That means something other than the people being the rulers, means on behalf of the people the rulers were taking the decisions for the people, by the people, and of the people. They could have ruled directly only if numbers were small, a few hundred at best, so that the people could meet regularly and they take decision and occupy public office. But modern nations consist of many millions, at least, hence, such nations of democracy are fenced. And after that, we have discussed about the revolutionaries and counter revolutionaries. They pursued another logic of democratic politics. And dictatorships, they could be imposed through perfectly democratic means. And the first practitioner of this act of politics was Louis Napoleon in France, 1851. When he was elected through a plebiscite, he later proclaimed himself emperor and ruled essentially by decree on this democratic foundation. We have discussed about German parliament, that is the name of Reichstag. That was enabling act of 1933. Judiciary, Supreme Court, we have discussed about, if we are talking about the judiciary, and the two important functions of judiciary is to apply the law, to interpret the law, and that it declare what the real law was. Next reason why such a judiciary is deemed essential for democracy. Yes, judiciary is very important tool for the democracy. This means that the highest court of the land, usually called the Supreme Court. And the modern democratic politics is not democratic in many essential respects. Even in the countries always proclaimed as this judicial review is in the hands of a group of persons responsible to nobody, but they responsible to themselves. And the state exercises almost unlimited and continually expanding related to these. And states claim to the legitimacy of its rule and the political parties' mobilization of popular support are founded on the rights of citizens. Means they maintained they were making political parties on behalf of the people. If the people of that particular area they were facing any problem, then they can take a decision. No, they can give some chance to the political leaders to take the decision on behalf of that particular area or the particular group of the people. That's why they were facing some problems also, and they were making some political parties also. Next, Unit 2. I think Unit 1, you all understand very perfectly. So, Unit 1, in Unit 2, radical action by the masses means the group of people, means the crowd of people, they were facing some problems just related. Have you heard about the word radical? Radical is a word that is used for taking any strong decision. Okay, that for that particular reason we can use radical word. And in Unit 2 we are discussing about radical action by the masses. The French Revolution made France a trailblazer in the domain of political culture. It is not only established new principles of politics and democracy, which continued to influence the European mind subsequently. It provided a new vocabulary of revolutionary action. The revolutionary doctrines of liberty, equality, fraternity continue to hold a special place even today in democratic societies the world over, besides studying the immediate cause of revolution. Means the revolutionary doctrines of liberty, equality, and fraternity. They continue to hold a special place even today in democracy, in democratic society, in the world also. What was that? Liberty, equality, and fraternity. Besides studying the immediate cause of revolution, it is necessary to know how the popular intervention of many people, means the ordinary people, at crucial moments not only saved the revolution, but cause of revolution, we should know about the popular intervention of ordinary people at crucial moments. Means on any crucial moments, because at the time of war, at the time of any circumstances which they were facing very harshly, the what type of decisions they were taking, who the ordinary people, what they were doing, and what was the powers they were facing at that time, they were using at that time. That is the main thing to discuss about in French Revolution, because before knowing the causes of French Revolution. Next is revolutionary overthrow of ancient regime and democratic action. France was the most populous and powerful state of Europe in 1780s, and majority of its population lived in countryside. Economic crisis and popular disturbances. What were the economic crisis and what were the popular disturbances the people were facing at that time? For the most of 18th century, the French economy was marked by moderate growth and prosperity. The prosperity and the growth was moderate at that time, not a very big and not a very low. However, its fruits were spread unevenly. There was a distinct expansion of the oil industry, cotton manufacturers, large seaports, sugar refinery, colonial commerce. Means they were having very uneven distribution of these things. Uneven. They were not having any power to collect all these things evenly. From 1771 to 1772, bad harvest led to an inevitable increase in grain and bread prices, which caused disturbances at several places. Because if the price of bread, if the price of grain increasing very rapidly, then what type of disturbing the people were facing at that time? On behalf of bread, uh, they were maintaining in a queue, and they were waiting for the breads. And if they were not getting any bread, then they got anger, and they got radical at that time. And we are talking about the begin from 1775. Overproduction of wine caused falling prices and low profits. Overproduction of wine. The depression of wine trade lasted 7 to 8 years. And next, we are discussing about the financial collapse of state and political crisis. Financial. Earlier, we have studied about economic crisis, bread prices and grain prices. They increased, and the wine prices they get low at that time. Financial collapse of the state and political crisis. The existing government was unable to curtail expenses because and a defective taxation structure caused financial collapse. With a deficit of 112 million livres, government's ability to raise credit was exhausted. France faced national bankruptcy, fiscal exemption granted to the nobility and clergy were causing resentment. Yes, we will discuss about the three estates further. First of all, we are going to discuss about the revolt of notables and parliaments. The Assembly of Notables met at Versailles. Versailles is a place name, and the Royal Palace near Paris. On 22 February 1787, members made bitter and unrestrained attacks on Talon's fiscal proposals, and the reforms were brusquely rejected. The Assembly of Notables marked the beginning of revolution. The aristocracy was bitterly hostile to the growing power of royal government. The notables declared that it was beyond their power to consent to the levying of new taxes. A leading notable, Lafayette, argued that only a truly national assembly could assent to the drastic tax reforms, and that such an assembly was the Estates General which had not met since 1614. Next is calling of Estates General and the coming of revolution. Earlier, we have discussed about revolt of notables and parliaments. Means they were having some clash, they were facing some clash, and that is the main reason for starting the revolution, starting point of revolution. Next is calling of a States General and coming of revolution. If they were facing any disturbances, then they were calling the States General for solving the problems. The States General consists of three groups representing the three parts of French society. Each part was called an estate. The first estate consists of Roman Catholic clergy. Clergy means the priest and the saints of the particular church. And which church? Roman Catholic Church. That's why they were known as Roman Catholic clergy. And the second order and the second estate of that is known as the nobility. Nobility means high officials under clergy. While the third estate, they comprised commoners. Commoners representing the bulk of French population. The bulk of French population who were unprivileged and shouldered the entire tax burden. Means the first order and the second order, they were exempted from tax. And the third order means the third estate, which is connected with the bulk of French population, means the bulk of population, they were privileged, unprivileged, not privileged, because first order and second order they were facing the privileges and they were winning privileges, and the third order they were known as unprivileged. They were not having any type of relaxation on behalf of tax, on behalf of works, and they shouldered the entire tax burden. Every tax they were giving. Who? The third order. Within the third estate, however, vast differences existed in matters of occupation, on the matter of occupation, education, and wealth. Separate elections were held for each estate, and the voters draw up their list of grievances for their representatives. It was not simply the economic crisis, it was not simply the political issues which brought the people together. The main problem was the growing contradictions in French society. Contradictions they were facing in French society. A small percentage of total population enjoyed all the privileges, while the bulk of people shouldered the entire fiscal or tax burden of the state, and they faced social discrimination. They were facing social discrimination. Who? The third order. And first order and the second order, they were facing, they were winning each and everything. They were privileged classes also. And the States General met on 5 May 1789, and matters came to head immediately. Means they were in a meeting on 5th May 1789, and what were the matters? The matters came to head immediately in the absence of any firm lead from the government. The government had double the seats of the third estate because it represented the most populous segment of society. That's why. Consequently, the commoners walked out and voted itself a National Assembly on 17 June. After 5 May 17 June 1789, calling themselves the true representatives of the people. Who? The third order. They were calling themselves the true and the real representatives of the people to themselves on 17 June 1789. They decided to draw up a constitution for France and bring about legal equality because they were facing a lot of problems. Then how they can decided to give a lot of tax on behalf of clergy, also on behalf of nobility also. They decided to draw up a constitution for France and bring about legal equality. In this way, they reflected the Enlightenment ideas of popular sovereignty in place of a despotic government, as suggested by Abbe Sayes in his famous pamphlet. What was the name of the famous pamphlet? What is the third estate? Now you came to know what was the power they were give to the third estate. The role of philosophers in all these entire things, the role of philosophers mattered a lot at that time, because if the philosophers were not coming at that time, the third order, they were facing a lot of problems, and they were in the burden of taxes, and they were unprivileged also. And after coming of the philosophers, they gained some control on their hands, and they can take decisions on behalf of the people. An important strand of thought and action in the years between 1789 and 1848 was set by Rousseau's Social Contract, in which he wrote in 1762, which he wrote, what he wrote: Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. That is a very big sentence, very big to know about, to understand about. Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. When a man get birth, then he or she is free from every social level, every type of evils. But after gaining birth, after taking birth, he was bounded with the chains. That is the main connection with the Rousseau's social contract, in which he wrote. The spread of ideas of the Enlightenment to the literate elites was an important step, but equally significant was the role of salons and clubs. Now they are giving some importance to salons and the clubs. Means the group of organization, the an organization which is connected to the people for the enlightenment to the literate elites. Okay, that was salons and clubs. Salons were the elegant drawing rooms of wealthy urban elite, where philosophers and guests gather and often engaged in academic and intellectual conversation centering on new ideas. Salons, drawing rooms of wealthy urban elite persons, where they take decisions, where they discussed a lot on intellectually, on academically, and they were enhancing the new ideas on their particular place. That is known as salons. And after salons, we have discussed about the clubs. The same thing they were doing in clubs also. We will discuss in of about Jacobin Club further. Popular participation in overthrowing the ancient regime. Popular participation. How they overthrow ancient regime, and they participate in other things also. The fall of Bastille is traditionally celebrated as the beginning of French Revolution. The fall of Bastille is traditionally celebrated as the beginning of French Revolution. The political consequences were remarkable. The National Assembly was met only saved. It received royal recognition. Peasants began to attack their lords, burn and destroy chariots, means country mansions of the nobility, destroy feudal documents, refuse to pay taxes and tithe. Tithe is a type, tithe and tele. What was the type of tax which was given by the peasants to the government? Tithe and tele. They were refusing at that time to pay tax, to pacify the peasants and restore order. The National Assembly declared the abolition of feudal regime along with seigneurial privileges and the old socio-political structure. Next, the second major work was the Declaration of Right of Man. That is very important for all of you. You should write it down also. Declaration of Rights of Man. They declared proclamation of liberty, equality, and fraternity, which became a manifesto of freedom. It turned the royal subjects into citizens of France and was provided legal equality. That is a main difference. From October 1789 until 1795, women participated in the revolution in a variety of ways. Olympe de Gaulle became the principal spokesperson for the cause of political rights for women. They demanded equality with men. They demonstrated for bread, price control, joined in the defense of their fatherland. These type of words they were using at that time, fatherland type. The abolition of tithe was followed by the nationalization of all church property. They abolished the tithe tax. That was followed by nationalization for all church property and the land which was put for sale. By the civil constitution of the clergy, bishops and priests were to be elected by popular vote, and the clergy were turned into salaried state officials who had to take the oath of allegiance to the constitution. Means if they were connected and they were having the clergy power, then they had to take the oath of allegiance to the constitution. Principles of legitimation. A number of historians, just like Dennis Richey, just like Jennifer, etc., they point out that the resolution voted on 17 June 1789 by the Third Estate to constitute itself into the National Assembly was the first and the most profound revolutionary act. Two debates of the Constitution Assembly were crucial from the point of view of the principles of legitimacy. Those were number one, the Declaration of Rights of Man, and second one is the subject of sovereignty. Declaration of Man, Declaration of Rights of Man, and the subject of sovereignty. That were the 2 points, two debates that were facing by the Constituent Assembly. Very crucial point of that particular time. By destroying the feudal regime, means feudalism destroyed, the Constituent Assembly had redefined the French people as individuals who were free and equal. Liberty, property, security, resistance to oppression were made some of the basic rights. Next is the Jacobin Republic and the Terror. Radicals draw support from the Parisian mob as well as from extremist political action groups like the Cordeliers and Jacobin clubs. They deposed the king and formed a national convention to draft a new republican constitution in August to September 1792. It was chosen on the basis of universal male suffrage. An alliance between Jacobins and popular movement, particularly the sans cultors of Paris communes. They provided an essential foundation for the revolutionary dictatorship under the leadership of Robespierre against the enemies of liberty. Next is ideological divisions and contours of party politics. When the Legislative Assembly met in October 1791, in accordance with the provisions of new constitution consisting of 745 members, there were no sharp divisions among the members who passed back and forth from one group to another group. Party formations were slow and close party organization hardly existed. Many members of assembly began to develop extreme views of republicanism. Ideas spread, nurtured by the Jacobin and Cordelier clubs. Most vocal groups were for the removal of the king and planned a demonstration. Now they were talking about the removal of the king. Now the constitutionalists versus republicans. Less numerous but far more active were the left wing deputies of the Jacobin Club. Their strength was about 140. Like the Florins, the Jacobins had their supporters in the electoral assembly and reflected two distinct political tendencies. And next is the extreme radical formed the nucleus of the future Republican Party. They were more powerful in the clubs than in assembly. Their main leaders were Marlin D. Thanville, Chabot, Cawthon. The coming of war in 1792 deepened the gulf between moderates and the extremists. They were very facing very difficulties at that time. It intensified fears and panics due to grain shortage, speculation, black marketing, external threats of counter-revolutionaries also. And next is the Montagnards adopted policies geared to the needs of the masses and did not hesitate in seeking popular support and adopted policies satisfying popular demands. The misconduct of foreign war, daunting economic troubles with France, because I'm going to sum up Unit 1 and Unit 2. And in sum up, we have discussed a lot of things just related to adopted policies, needs of masses, and they seeking popular support, and they adopt policies, they satisfying popular demands, and the misconduct of foreign war, and the daunting economic troubles within France, such as the falling value of assignat, revolutionary paper money, and the insoluble food problems was weakening the position of Girondins. And next, so it was the combined force of Montagnards, numerically small, and Sans-Culottes, which brought about the coup. We have discussed a lot related to political struggle between the Girondins and the Montagnards. Political struggle between Girondins and Montagnards, they tore apart the convention and they lasted till the former were expelled by the invasion of the Parisian crown. There is a difference of opinion on the nature of this struggle, whether it was based on personal rivalries and lust for a power or the reflection of social and economic class struggle. The Girondins is seen as a party of wealth, representing the upper bourgeoisie, while the Montagnards had a social base in the lower middle class and the menu people. Menu people means the ordinary people. That is the main difference between these two categories. These two categories means Girondins and Montagnards. Girondins, party of wealth, representing the upper bourgeoisie, means upper class officials, Girondins, and the lower or ordinary class people, Montagnards. They had a social base in their lower middle class. And that's why the adopted policies geared to the needs of masses and did not hesitate in seeking popular support, and they adopt policies, they satisfy popular demands also. The misconduct of foreign war and the daunting economic troubles within France, such as falling value of assignat and the insoluble food problem, was weakening the position of Girondins, because the middle class and the lower class people, they win, they want the support of the political parties also, they want the support of the ordinary people also. That's why they won, and the Girondins was getting weak at the time of position, and so it was a combined force of Montagnards and Saint Plutos which brought about the coup. Thank you. And we have discussed a lot about Unit 1 and 3. In our next class, we will discuss about Unit 3 and 4 of European history. Thank you. Have a nice day.